So lately, there have been lots of discussions, leaks, and rumors about the PlayStation 6 and the next Xbox console. It seems like the PlayStation 6 is getting quite a spotlight on it right now. There's been rumors just as early as this morning talking about a detachable disk drive for the PlayStation 6, which, I mean, if you've been watching how Sony has been handling the PlayStation 5, that shouldn't come as a huge surprise to you, unless you're surprised that there is going to be a physical media aspect to it, because that is a little bit surprising as we move towards the digital age. Evidently, there are multiple SKUs, and there's like different ones. There's gonna be handheld PlayStation 6, and then there's gonna be a console PlayStation 6. There may actually be a weaker console version of a PlayStation 6. Lots of fun and exciting things are happening with that. Then over on the Xbox side of things, you of course have the ROG Xbox Ally handheld coming out. You evidently have another Xbox handheld coming out. You have the next Xbox coming out, with Sarah Bond telling you about how it's going to be a huge technological leap, all of this sort of fun stuff. And I'm sitting here like, why the hell are we talking about these systems right now? Do we need these systems right now? Am I the only one who feels like this is absolutely pointless to be talking about right now in the year of our Lord 2025? And this may be a bit of an unpopular opinion. This may be a video that people come along and say, oh, it's just an old man yelling at the cloud. So if you feel similar to how I feel, whether it's exactly what I say or just the overall mantra of it, be sure to give this video a like. Be sure to subscribe if you're new, leave a nice comment, and share the video with your friends, because I don't understand this. I don't understand this. And when you look at the launch of these consoles, obviously it was a little bit behind the 8 ball when it came to launching the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X. I bought both of these on day one in 2020 during the pandemic. Obviously not a great time to launch a platform because you're going to have a slower trickle of software. There was lots of cross-generational titles that came out on both the PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5 and Xbox One and Xbox Series systems. Now, that doesn't mean that these games were necessarily bad games because they released across two platforms, but it did take a little bit of the sizzle off of the current gen versions, which are now the current gen versions of PS5 and Xbox Series, because really, you could have played them on your old console. Now, yes, maybe you don't get the visual fidelity of, a reflection or some lighting or something like that, but the same core experience was the same core experience. Now, as time has gone on, just looking at how this console generation has played out, I think it's definitely been a softer generation. Now, that's not to say that there haven't been great first-party games from both companies. I think Astro Bot was a great game. Ratchet and Clank was a great game. Over on the Xbox side of things, you have stuff like Indiana Jones, my game of the year for 2024. But it definitely seems like these games are a bit fewer and farther between than what we are normally accustomed to when it comes to things like this. And obviously, that's because of things like the pandemic and when these consoles came out. But it's also the fault of the companies themselves, because let's be realistic, these companies were searching for that big games as a service game to help launch them into more and more money, whether or not the consumer was really interested in these games. And we've kind of seen the fallout from that situation. Now, yes, games like Helldivers have exceeded expectations with Helldivers 2, that is now a multi-platform game, but for the most part, most of these games either came and went or never saw the light of day. Remember Concord? That was supposed to be the big game. What's going on with Marathon? Remember Redfall? Like, games that nobody really asked for, nobody really wanted, but were still thrust upon us. And it seems like now we're starting to see a potential course correction when it comes to stuff like this. But the problem is, we've already been waiting quite a while for first-party studios to really start to shine on these platforms, and now we have to wait a bit longer because these first-party studios were working on games that weren't of interest to the consumer base, and then we lost time. Over on the Xbox side of things, there were games that we were interested in. Remember Perfect Dark? What the hell happened with Perfect Dark? That was one of the more interesting Xbox titles, and now that's gone. You start to learn about games that are coming out in 2027, 2028, and it's like, what are we doing here? Why are these things taking so long to make? And that's not necessarily the fault of the platforms themselves, but it's the fault of the developers making games for these platforms, because let's be realistic here. What the hell is a PlayStation 6 or an Xbox Series Z, I don't know, that's just what we're going to call it for this video, going to do that the current systems cannot do now? You're going to get some more pores on the textures. You're going to get some better hair physics. Like, why do we need these systems? Have we tapped out what the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series are capable of? And people will be quick to say, well, RGT. You've talked about a game recently, such as, of course, Metal Gear Solid Delta, that had performance issues, and it would be better with stronger hardware. And to that I say, would it be? Would it be? Because right now there's something on the market called a personal computer. And a personal computer is more advanced than the consoles that we have right now. Can do things like higher resolutions, higher visual fidelity, higher specs, and all of this sort of stuff that you could do on there. And yet, the PC versions of the game still struggle to run in a proper manner that most people would expect it to, because it's not necessarily down to power, it's down to optimization of these engines. Unreal Engine 5 kind of stinks. Like, yes, it can do some cool stuff, but in the same breath, there have been more problems with Unreal Engine 5 than I feel like it's really worth. You know, you look at games that have came and released on platforms that have had technological issues, and it's kind of like, well, where's that Matrix Reloaded experience? Remember that demo? Why haven't we seen anything like that released in, what, 2021, I believe it was? We haven't seen anything really on that visual fidelity level. You can even, when talking about visual fidelity, go back to games that released on the Xbox One and the PlayStation 4 that still hold up great to this day. Games like Horizon, which, granted, I'm not a huge fan of Horizon or anything like that. I think Aloy is a crappy character, but I do think that the game still looks visually stunning. A game like Gears of War 6 looks, or 5 I should say, looks visually stunning on older hardware. So is it really at the fault of the hardware that we need more, or is it at the fault of the developers for focusing on things like hyper-realistic graphics and making these games overinflated and overbloated to the point of where it takes them years and years to come out? You can look at, people will say, you know, oh, well, look at, you know, in the 90s. In the 90s, look at console generation life cycles. They were much shorter. And that was because there was technology ever growing. You know, you compare a Super Nintendo to a Nintendo 64, there is a clear generational leap. You compare a Sega Genesis to a Sega Saturn, once again, a clear generational leap. PlayStation 1 to a PlayStation 2. You know what I'm going to say? A clear generational leap. And yet, those developers were able to get the most out of their games and really sort of create something where a PlayStation 1 game at the launch of the system was nothing like a PlayStation 1 game towards the tail end of the system. Look at Tekken 1 to Tekken 3. It is a night and day difference. And every one of these consoles had generational leaps during the generation itself. You're not getting that anymore because of the way that games are created, because of these long wait times, because of these long development cycles. So in saying all of that, I go back to the main point of why are we talking about a PlayStation 6 and an Xbox Series Z when realistically speaking, I don't feel like we've come anywhere close to tapping out what we can do on the PlayStation 5. Death Stranding 2 and the Decima engine is an extremely impressive looking and running game on the PlayStation 5. RE engine is a very impressive engine that can give you some great looking games. How much further do we really need to go with some of these games in terms of visual fidelity? Do people genuinely care about how many hair follicles and how many pores you could see on somebody's skin? Or do they care about a game just looking good and playing great? I would rather play a game that is super fun and plays very well, that maybe doesn't have the most cutting edge graphics, than something that's clearly a technological showpiece to just show off graphics that has no sort of real substance when it comes to the gameplay. Kind of like the Order 1886 or something like that. Great looking game, but the gameplay wasn't exactly lighting the world on fire, and that's why we never saw another one of those games. When you look at some of the most popular games right now, they're not necessarily the big graphical showpiece games. They're games that have a fun aspect to them, that have a user base of fans that are gravitating towards it. Look at Hollow Knight Silksong. That thing released on everything, including the original Nintendo Switch, and people love the game. It's one of the best-selling games of 2025. And it's not a graphical showcase. It's not a graphical showpiece. It's a game that looks good and plays good, and people are a fan of the franchise itself. These long development times that we're having with games are not magically going to get better with next generation consoles. If anything, I think there's a precedent set to ensure that games will take actually longer to release. I come from an era where if a game was successful, a year or so later, you got a sequel to it. Resident Evil 2 was considered to be a catastrophic situation because it took nearly 2 years for it to come out after Resident Evil 1. And they scrapped that entire game and had to rebuild it from the ground up to make a different game than what Resident Evil 2 was supposed to be. And yet, now, if you got a sequel in a year and a half, this would be, you'd be dancing in the streets. You'd be like, oh my God, this is incredible. How did we do this? How did this happen? And it's like, people tend to forget history with these consoles. There was a necessity in the 90s to move on to the next consoles because of one thing that is completely lost on this generation. And that, my friends, is competition. You had so many different console manufacturers all creating first-party games and pushing the medium as far as graphics and gameplay and game concepts were concerned. When you look at what competition is in 2025, what competition? PlayStation releases games on Xbox. Xbox releases games on PlayStation. PC is there if you're a graphics whore and you want the best looking graphics, and PC is always going to look better than what the console can do. So I don't understand this push towards new consoles. Is it going to change and make for greater games? Is it going to make for a steadier output of games? Or is it going to be more of the same, but potentially longer wait times to get these big banger games and get these games that are optimized for the systems themselves? And I have no reason to believe, especially when you look at the video game landscape right now, that that is going to be the case. If anything, I see things getting potentially worse. Longer waiting times, more time dedicated to learning the ins and outs of the new systems and stuff. And oh, we made it so much easier to make games for now. It's so much easier. Newsflash. It's easier to make games right now than it was in the 90s and the 2000s, yet the turnaround time is ridiculously insane. No matter if you're talking about an indie title, a AA title, or a AAA title, you are waiting elongated periods of time for these games to come out because the developers themselves are making them more complex. They're doing things like ray tracing and, scanning faces and crap like that and all this sort of nonsense that at the end of the day doesn't really impact the gameplay itself. We should be targeting certain things. I don't understand how much better we need graphics to be. I look at a game like Resident Evil 4, I don't see why we need to go beyond that. I can honestly look at games like Resident Evil 2 and 3 Remake and say, I don't really see why we need to go beyond this. These are great looking games, great playing games, and yeah, they look a little bit cleaner on the next generation platform, so that's a cool thing. But realistically speaking, how much further can we go? How much further do we need to go? We should be trying to figure out these engines that we have now available to us to maximize our output, to enlighten our creative experiences and create new things and new genres and new styles of games and take a little bit of a risk. But you also can't do that right now because of the fact of the way of the video game industry, because you have these overinflated budgets with teams that are way too big, shareholders breathing down your neck to get the most money out of you that they absolutely can. And yet we're talking about a PlayStation 6 and the next generation Xbox console. It's ridiculous. I think it's absolutely ridiculous. I will buy them because it is my job. You know, it is a job that I have chosen to do, and it's a job that I genuinely enjoy doing. But the fact of the matter is, I just think it's too soon. If I didn't see a new PlayStation or a new Xbox console come out until 2030, I don't think I would be feeling like I'm missing out on much. Because what are you going to do that's so much different? What are you going to do that's so much better that you're not doing on the PlayStation 5 right now? The PlayStation 4 still exists. There are still games that come out on the PlayStation 4. But yet we're in a hurry. We got to move on to the next generation. Things are going to be different. Things are going to be better. And it's like, are they? Is there any sort of proof, any sort of indication that this is going to be better? That things are going to be better, that experiences are going to be better. And there are definitely other avenues I could really travel down with this, because some of it does fall indeed on the developers. And, you know, I feel like just the lack of optimization, the whole culture of, oh, we can do a day one patch. We can patch it later. We can figure this out later. Like, you got to imagine, dude. That is what companies, I honestly feel like a vast majority of companies have that mentality to where, oh, we can just fix it later, you know, get something out there. So realistically speaking, it's taking even longer to create these games. And it's like, scale it back a little bit, bro. Not everything needs to be this insane technological deep storytelling with Hollywood actors sort of narrative driven game. Those are fine. Those play a role and those can be very enjoyable. But variety is the spice of life. And it seems like we've forgotten that. It seems like video game companies have forgotten that. But maybe you're excited for the PS6 and the Xbox Series Z, and you can't wait to put down your pre-order money for the next generation of consoles. I don't, you know what, if you are excited, like, that's cool, man. I don't really care, but I am curious to hear why you would be excited, what you think is going to be different, and not even necessarily different, what you think is going to be better. Because I don't think development times are going to be better. I don't think games are going to be automatically better because of new hardware as far as games that are coming out on that hardware. I think the cross-generational gap is going to be even longer than it was with the last generation of systems, which went on for far too long in many people's opinions. And I feel like people and developers are just going to be like, what the hell is going on here? Like, we're still working on PS5 games, and now you're introducing a new system with new hardware and stuff. I don't know. It's really just down to personal preference. So let me know what you think of everything in the comments section down below. And as always, guys, thank you for checking out this video. It ended up being a long one, but hey, size matters, length matters. I don't know where I was going with that. And as always, like I said at the start of this video, if you enjoyed this video, if you resonate with any part of this video, be sure to share it with your friends. Leave a like, leave a nice comment. If you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button. And as always, I'll catch you guys on the next video. Later.